Hello and welcome to episode 280 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly Podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I'm joined today by Eva Padilla.
Hey, what's up?
Eva, it has been a week. You and I have played much more of Muramasa the Demon Blade. Actually, you and I have played much more of Muramasa Rebirth, because I'm pretty sure both of us are playing the Vita remaster. But with another week and another, 10 to 15 hours of playtime, I think I like the game more now than I did a week ago. The deeper you get into this game and the more swords you collect and the more bosses you fight, I think the more invested I was. And so I have mostly nice things to say about this quirky, weird Vanillaware game from almost 15 years ago. What are your impressions having finished the game recently?
I think it's awesome. I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I think it's a pretty lean adventure in a great way because, so often with these games, it takes so much longer for leveling. So much of this is a game that might stretch to, 25 or 30 hours. And with the DLC, you could do that. But, I put in, I think, 14 hours into getting 2 endings for both Momohime and Kisuke. Had a great time with it. I really enjoyed a lot of what I saw, a lot of what I played. Combat felt good to me. Easy, but good. And yeah, I think this title is pretty underrated. Like, I was trying to look around on my podcast app to see other podcasts that talk about it. Not much. It's pretty rare to see this game talked about, and I think that's a dang shame.
Yeah, and I don't think that this game is unpopular or unloved either, because when we were posting materials from our when we were posting the podcast from last week, it did pretty well on social media, and when you look at reviews around the game, it was received positively in the moment for the most part. And like I looked at our Muramasa Rebirth review on RPG Fan from 9 years ago, and I think it got an 85 or something. Like, this is a liked game that, or at least an appreciated game that just doesn't have a lot of, doesn't have a huge audience. Like, there's not a lot of volume of Muramasa content out there, and this is something I don't love doing, but this thing could use a recent remake. Like, again, like, modern port begging is something that I think is a little intellectually lazy. Like, of course, good games from 8 years ago should be put onto modern consoles. Of course they should be. But this is a perfect candidate for it because it's only available on 2 systems that are not dead, but quite in the past. And I think that Vanillaware is, if not high on the hog, then doing pretty okay right now, since they had an Odin Sphere remake about 2 years ago and the successful 13 Sentinels last year. Like this is a perfect candidate for a Switch or PS5 port or similar. And because like you, I had a lot of fun with it. I also got to the second endings for both characters. My time investment was similar, probably around 14 or 15 hours. Like, this is a game that I finished and I'm satisfied with everything I got out of it, but I'm still thinking about maybe playing more of it because there is some depth and a post game to Muramasa. This is just a good game all around that does a lot of things that are very fun and interesting, and but the thing that everyone rightfully keeps going back to is just how pretty it is. It is so beautiful, from the animations to the bosses, to especially the backgrounds. Like, these are among the best backgrounds I've ever seen in a 2D action game.
Absolutely. And when I've seen videos of it running on Dolphin, because with it originally being a Wii game,
right? And Dolphin being a GameCube and Wii emulator.
Exactly. And so I've seen it up-res to much higher resolution, seeing pushing like 4K. And, wow, that art upscale looks incredible. But then, you run into the problem that even on Dolphin, the problem is that it's just the Wii game. So it doesn't have the stuff that's added for Rebirth, including the DLC. So the DLC stuff is pretty much only on Vita, and we still really haven't cracked Vita emulation yet. We're not quite there yet. So it's kind of just locked to that system.
Yeah, I think that the emulation community is pretty good at jailbreaking Vitas and putting PS1 emulators on it, but they're not. They haven't completely solved the puzzle of Vita emulation.
Right. I've seen plenty of Vitas running like Super Mario World and such.
Right. Which is also troubling because there was recent news about Sony likely ending the online stores for the PSP, PS3, and Vita, which we don't have an official announcement yet, but that seems like it's coming. And there's a lot to be worried about there, but we won't make that part a large part of this podcast discussion. But you mentioned a couple things. The DLC for this game and the different endings to this game, I stopped short of 100% completion on Muramasa the Demon Blade because, again, each character has 3 endings. And you and I think, each only got to the first 2 for each character. And that's a little regrettable. Like I would sort of like to maybe see everything this game has to offer. I've avoided going on to YouTube or wiki articles to see what those endings are, just because I don't know. It felt like me breaking a rule or something, even though I easily could have. But that's only because of the time investment. To unlock those last endings, you need to unlock all 108 swords. Which, makes sense on paper. It's like, sure, you unlock everything and then you can get the best ending. That makes sense. But to unlock all the swords, you have to go into Caves of Evil for something like for something like 6 or maybe 8 of the last swords. And the recommended levels for some of them get into the 80s. Like, you should be in level 85-90 range to get those last couple secret swords. And I finished the game with exactly 88 swords. So I didn't quite get to the number of earthly temptations, but I did get to the number of keys on a piano at least. But
almost as good.
Yeah, but grinding levels and grinding souls, because you have to spend soul and spirit to forge blades, and spirit is easy because you get spirit from eating food, but souls is just beating a bunch of enemies. Grinding for levels and souls to get to those. For both characters, it felt like probably another 10 hours or so that I was not willing to invest.
Yeah, probably about that. After finishing the second endings for both of them, where I left off was in kind of that sweet spot of I've used these characters and their expressive motions enough where I'm not sick of it yet, but I think I'm just about satisfied with it, and I think any more of it might have soured me a bit more. And I like the both of their second endings. Like, those were fine enough, not just fine enough, but good endings, where I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't think I really need to see those third endings. These feel just fine to me.
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same headspace. Like, I thought that the second endings for both characters were good and cute. Like, I liked both of them a lot. And while I have not completely exhausted my level of stamina for Muramasa, if I were to grind to level 90 and get those final endings, I would run the risk of getting tired of this game. So Muramasa's good. It did not wear out its welcome on me, but grinding all the way to the end, maybe it would wear out its welcome in a way that I sort of don't want to do. Plus, I have, oh geez, you know me, I have 6 other games I should be playing for a podcast. And I was ready to move on from Muramasa when I got to the end. But before we talk about the endings specifically and the plot specifically, there's a couple things that are definitely worth talking about in Muramasa the Demon Blade that we sort of either glossed over or didn't really get to in the previous episode. And one thing, just one quick hit, I love the food in this game.
Oh my god, yeah.
Odin Sphere did a good job of this too, of making food like an important part of the gameplay. And either George Kamitami or his colleagues at Vanillaware or all of those, I think they just love drawing and animating food, because even just like buying mochi at a mochi stand or rolling onigiri in your hand and pressing the X button on a Vita to sort of munch through the food. It was just fun every time. It's almost useless animation and art in a way that they didn't need to do this. They could have made food just an inventory item and not have semi-lavish animations for it, but they did, and I love it.
Yeah, it's a bit decadent, especially for a game that did not have a large team. But that's the thing that I kind of really appreciate about this game is that it's like there are a massive amount of resources poured into spaces that you wouldn't expect, where it's like, wow, this is some of the best looking food I've ever seen in a video game, or how the waves look in the backgrounds. It's like, come on, really? That's what you did? That's incredible. Those are some of the best waves I've ever seen.
But you can tell that they just looked at traditional Japanese art from that time and represented it everywhere in the backgrounds, especially for like the way the bamboo layers over each other and the way the waves crash into each other and the way the sunsets are positioned in a way that's just beautiful. And again, I hate to roll everything back into Yakuza games, but them being my most recent gaming obsession, there's something about unnecessary details that are just so fun to encounter when you do encounter them. That just makes me appreciate a game more. Like Yakuza did not need... Most of the Yakuza games have darts, and whenever there's a darts game in a Yakuza game, they have like 10 rule sets in each darts game. It's like, you didn't need to do this. You could have just made a count-up rule for every game of darts. They didn't. They could have just had that, and it would have been fine. But instead, they have pro darts rule sets and like 10 different ways to play darts in Yakuza games. They didn't need to do that, but I love that they do have that. And in Muramasa, they didn't need to have like 20 kinds of beautifully animated food, but they did, and I love that they did.
It's kind of like the antithesis of AAA development, where it's like, oh yeah, the large amount of resources were poured into the large meat of the gameplay. Like, you can tell resources were allocated in a very workmanlike fashion. And it's like this percentage of the resources needs to go into this because it's this percentage of the game, etc. And then with kind of these smaller titles, especially with how Vanillaware has kind of like a boutique sort of way of making their games, the attention to detail can just take you by surprise. And I think that's kind of Muramasa's secret weapon is just surprising you in strange and unexpected ways, where kind of I went into the game expecting one thing in terms of just kind of being wowed by the aesthetics. And sure, I was wowed by the aesthetics, but there was more to it that I really loved, including I ended up liking the narrative quite a bit and the characters. After like the first hour, I started to really enjoy the combat as being just kind of this fun hack and slash sort of thing on the lower difficulty. So,
and that's another. The difficulty setting is another thing that I don't think you and I explored completely, because we mentioned that there's Legend and Chaos difficulty. Legend sort of being normal, and Chaos being the enemy being a lot more active, and you having to use your evade mechanics much more. And if you beat the game, I think on any ending on Chaos, you unlock a third difficulty called Fury, which I believe is the same as Chaos, except you have 1 HP permanently, and 1 hit kills you.
Oh my god!
Yeah, and then there is I don't know how many achievements there are for Fury difficulty, but I think that only the real crazy people play this game on Fury. But I thought the story in this game was good, but also sort of disjointed. Like every boss fight was definitely incorporating something from Japanese folklore, or retelling or twisting a Japanese fairy tale or piece of mythos in a way that I loved. But they would also like almost like a grindhouse reel missing kind of situation sometimes. There's a boss fight on the Momohime path where you fight a large oni, and I think that they do a sort of a Momotaro hiding behind stones a mechanic for that boss fight that I thought was really cool. But when you go into the boss room for the first time, suddenly it's Momohime hiding, saying, "Oh no, Jinkaro's soul got eaten," and it's like, what? When did that happen?
Yeah.
But then she tricks the Oni into him swallowing her. She frees Jinkaro's soul and cuts out of him, and then the boss fight begins properly. But like, it almost feels like there was a scene missing. But that might be a Japanese theater thing, with things happening off stage, and then the narrator providing context. And I think they used a Rakugo narrator a couple times in this game. Rakugo is a sort of a form of Japanese half storytelling, half stand-up comedy, where it's like someone sits behind a platform with a towel and an orange and tells a story full of puns and weird humor. I believe that there is some Rakugo narration in the game, because I think there was even a Rakugo performer in the credits, like as a specific line. And I only know what Rakugo is. You're gonna laugh, because of one season of Super Sentai had a Rakugo narrator do all of the episode previews.
That's fair. I mean, I know it from the anime series Shogun Roku Rakugo Shinju.
Oh, nice.
Which I won't try to get too off topic, but if you haven't seen that, it's the best TV show I've ever seen. Just gonna put that out there. It's incredible.
I was being a little misleading. I have run into Rakugo in a couple other spheres that completely make sense, being me. The Super Sentai series with Rakugo in it is one of the 1990s ones, so that was where I found it first. But there is a Rakugo murder case in one of the later Phoenix Wright games. I believe it's the most recent one that was released worldwide, Spirit of Justice. It's and also one series of Kamen Rider from the 2010s has a Rakugo performer who turns into a monster that Kamen Rider Forze has to fight. Rakugo is a very Japanese thing that is that takes a little bit of research, or is a little odd to explain to someone who's completely unfamiliar with it. And again, I was completely unfamiliar with it until watching Kaku Ranger and did a little bit of research on it, but totally fits for Muramasa, and is just a bunch of really interesting slices of Japanese art and culture to experience playing this game.
Absolutely, and how it kind of combines with the sort of kabuki stylings of the presentation. I mean, this game a lot of the time feels like a love letter to kind of Japanese mythology and different ways of how performers tell their stories, and that can be presented from a first-person narrator. It can be from a Rakugo performer. It can be this sort of omniscient voice and such. It's really wonderful in that way, I think.
One other piece of sort of Japanese traditionalism that I think we didn't talk enough about in the previous episode is the music in this game. It uses a lot of traditional Japanese instruments and traditional Japanese sort of musical genres, but it's just a really dope Hitoshi Sakimoto soundtrack.
Yeah. It's a really solid one. I don't think there's anything that has stood out to me as much as as some of his other works, like particularly like the Evilly stuff, of course, but it's still a really solid soundtrack nonetheless. It's Sakimoto. You're getting something good.
Yeah, and Sakimoto he tries to create a soundscape every single time that he that he does a soundtrack that fits the game. Like Muramasa doesn't have any bops that you're gonna hum to yourself or that or seek out on YouTube, but really specifically. But it's completely different from the more sort of dramatic orchestral stuff that he did in the Evilise games or Valkyria Chronicles, and nothing like the pop techno mishmash that he did for 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I guess Sakimoto's a regular collaborator with Vanillaware, but he just really put his best foot forward to make a soundtrack that fits the vibe and style of this game, and did so beautifully. Like you want a dramatic, like Japanese flute, taiko percussion kind of soundtrack for a game like this, and he absolutely delivered it.
Yeah, and then I think we may have mentioned this in the last episode, but when you go into combat encounters, then there are kind of more modern instruments that come into the fold that augment the more traditional instrumentation before, and I think that works really well. Part of the thing with the DLCs is that there's asset reuse for it in terms of the backgrounds and a lot of the music, but there's so much love that was poured into the music and to the backgrounds to both catch your eyes and ears and not make you feel tired of them, that it's like, all right, so I'm going to have to go through these things again and find new things to love about them because I'm definitely not sick of these environments or these soundscapes yet. Sure, bring it on.
Right, and we did mention this a little bit last week, but there are 4 DLC episodes for Muramasa Rebirth, the Vita version only, called Genroku Legends. I unfortunately didn't try any of them because incredibly bad timing with this PSN store news, but my Vita memory card died about a week ago. Again, it's extremely unlucky. So I lost a lot of save data for games that I had downloaded from the PS Store, including all of my Tactics Ogre data from when we played it last year, and multiple runs of Persona 4 and Persona 3 Portable, which I feel particularly bad about. But fortunately, I was playing Muramasa on a physical cart, and physical carts on the Vita save their data to the Vita's base memory. So I do have the data. I did not lose all my Muramasa data when my card died, and I still have my Trails of Cold Steel data from the podcast recording we did last year on it, or maybe 2 years ago by now. But so I because I did not have a working Vita memory card for the past week or so, I was not able to download Genroku Legends like I was planning to do. But you did play. Maybe you didn't finish all of them, but you did at least sample them, correct?
Yeah, I played at least a little bit of all 4 of them. So these DLCs, it's some of the strangest DLC that I've really ever seen because this is a remastering of a Wii game like 4 years later, and this content was not on there before. But all 4 of these are like pretty meaty DLCs. Playing all of these would take you about the length of what we did. 14 to 15 hours maybe. It might be a bit shorter than that, maybe somewhere in the like 10 to 15 hour range, depending on how much you want to put into it. But basically, for all of these 4, you have a different protagonist. So in the first one, you play as this girl named Okoi, who dies and basically has her soul fused with a cat, and becomes the Nikomata. You have Gonbei, who is a rice farmer who is basically banding together with his fellow villagers to talk with the local authorities because their taxes are way too high and they can't survive on this. He fights with a hoe and a farming sickle and his dead wife. It's weird. It's weird, but it's cool. Then there's a ninja named Arashimaru who only has 8 days to live, and he is he has this white snake goddess that exists around his neck and is part of his combat verb set. And there's the 4th one is a demon girl who's one of the 108 children of Enma. And hers is just kind of a silly story about her being proposed to by a guy who didn't mean to propose to her. And now she's going to meet his imaginary fiancé to tell her, like, it's okay, I'll marry him. Because he lied about it. So I've only done a little bit of all these, but this is the thing. I was probably at the extent of what I wanted to do playing as Kisuke and Momohime. All of these characters, they're not completely different from how they work, but they're different enough to make it interesting to control them.
Well, okay, rolling this back a little bit, Kisuke and Momohime play identically. Like, if and the controls for them are the same. It's just what weapons you're equipping that affects the gameplay between them. But you're saying that these 4 DLCs, they don't control the same way, only with different animations. There are more gameplay wrinkles added.
Oh yeah, so Catgirl changes between like a half human, half cat form and a cat form, and then this weird cat head goddess thing called an avatar form. Gonbei calls in villagers when he does basically like the blade switch when you press the triangle button and then you do like that quick strike.
Yeah, if your spirit is high, then you can do an Aiaido bonus attack whenever you switch what blades, right?
Yes, so when Gonbei does that, one of his fellow farmers comes in and helps him fight. And then Arashimaru can basically summon this snake that's existing around his neck as a giant snake that shoots out fireballs. And he also has kunai, bombs, and a sickle on a chain that he swings around violently.
So he's like one of the annoying ninjas that you killed 20,000 of in the main storyline.
A little bit. He takes a lot from those enemies, but he does have some wrinkles to it. And then Rajiaki changes between this child demon form, this kind of woman demon form, and then this sort of full demon avatar thing, kind of like the cat girl. So they all have these different wrinkles, and they follow a similar verb set to Kisuke and Momohime, but they feel different, and it's really fun to control them.
All right, now I'm 20% more interested in this DLC, and when I have a working Vita memory card again, I may just go ahead and download it. But cool. I think just looking at the trophy lists for each of them, it looks like that they were each about 3 or 4 chapters, which combined into one. This is a $15 DLC that is maybe the size of half of the entirety of Muramasa. This is meaty and interesting and different.
Yeah, pretty much. It's and just. They reuse backgrounds and music for it, but they use different characters and different sorts of narratives and ways of expression. Rajiaki is basically a baseball bat that shoots fireballs. That's sick.
Yeah, that all does sound cool. I think I am done with my Muramasa career for now, but one day down the line, revisiting this, grinding a little bit for the best third ending, and playing the DLC does sound like something I'd be interested in. Just not right now in March 2021, I'm afraid. But I was looking at the different transformations for the Demon Girl in the 4th DLC, and the 4th one, I'm sorry, the 3rd one, the final form that she has, which you can, I guess, only use for a limited time, is sort of. It has an unusual musculature to it that I sort of associate with Vanillaware's art style. Again, I haven't played all of the Vanillaware games to completion, but I have played a little bit of Odin's Sphere and Dragon's Crown, and things like the Knight in Dragon's Crown and Odin in Odin's Sphere. They have like a weird, exaggerated, gross musculature to them, and a lot of the and certain female characters in both games have just really, really weird art anatomy choices in the character designs. I'm talking about the gigantic breasts for the Queen of the Underworld in Odin's Sphere and the Sorceress in Dragon's Crown, and the weird thighs for the Amazon in Dragon's Crown. Like it's and also the school nurse character in 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. They do like weird body types and weird fan service in a lot of Odin Sphere games, which I think is a turnoff to a lot of people, because when Dragon's Crown came out in the early 2010s, a lot of people, without really knowing anything about the game, just made fun of the Sorceress and Amazon. That was part of the group narrative around the release of the game, probably unfairly, because that game is basically a kind of like Guardian Heroes or like a fantasy RPG version of a beat 'em up like Final Fight. But a lot of the narrative was around those character designs, and I think that Muramasa mostly dodges that. I mean, Momohime's pretty, but I don't think that she's really gross fan service in her character design. And I was sort of surprised there wasn't a lot of that in this game until until you hit the boss fight. I think it's Momohime Chapter 7 against Raijin.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Mike, she thick. She thick.
No two ways about it. She thick.
She thick.
I don't think it's quite as ridiculous as the tiny waist, gigantic boobs of the Sorceress and Dragon's Crown, but Raijin thick, and there's no denying it. It's that's the character that a lot of the Vanillaware titillation got rolled into, and seeing this sort of this broad-shaped woman with exaggerated like thighs and chest, but also like shy and in love with a tiny gnome of a wind god was just really amusing. And like a lot of the boss fight banter and like the sort of I don't know, the offbeat, whimsical nature of the different demons and gods you encounter in this game, I thought was really fun. And the handful of times you meet the literal Buddha were like it's like, well, this is weird, and the Buddha's being very serene, but it's kind of strange to talk to the Buddha in a game where I just defeated like half of the cast of Journey West.
Yeah, a little bit.
but yeah, Raijin, she got it going on, and Fujin, he's a god who knows what he likes.
Yeah, I think this is, and with sexualization like this, it's if you want to call it that, I guess. I don't really care or have too much of an issue with it. Like, yeah, it's kind of silly that during the boss fight, like, Raijin turns her butt to you, and you have to basically smack her butt with your sword. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't. Some people might have a different opinion on it, but I'm like, they're bigger fish to fry, and I don't.
Yeah,
it's whatever.
Exactly. like the female designs in Vanillaware games are a lot of them are sexualized. A lot of them are weirdly exaggerated and just unusual artistic choices. And it will completely differ from person to person how good or bad you think that is, or how or how intense your reaction will be to it. Like, I mean, if you watch a lot of anime or video, or play a lot of video games with these kind of designs, you probably won't even blink with Raijin. But it's different for every person. I think it is. I mean, it is designed to be titillating in a certain way, but like you said, this is not an issue that should be making any headlines. There are bigger fish to fry and bigger problems to address within portrayals of women and others in video games. We don't need to we don't need to waste a lot of breath on this. But yeah, I'm not gonna. I will not lie to you. Both of my eyebrows shot to the top of my forehead the first time you encounter Fujin and Raijin.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's kind of this thing, and especially with playing a lot of RPGs, there is this there are these designs and everything. I'm always just more concerned when there are narratives that are fully degrading, fully dehumanizing women, disparaging sex workers, things like that. That's if you're punching down on working class women in a game through your narrative, through your mechanics, etc., that's a little bit more of a problem for me than, I know, smacking thick god.
And coincidentally, there are sex workers in this game. Like you encounter prostitutes, including one or two oirans, who are sort of like prostitutes in a leadership role, and even like the ghosts of women that have just led a really hard life. There's once or twice you'll meet a ghost in one of the living areas saying, I was a prostitute, and when one of my clients was just went too far with me and escaped, and then Momohime or Jinkuro will say, I'm sorry we'll just say I'm sorry this happened. If we find him, we'll find justice for you. Like things like that, situations like that are like, oh, this is acknowledging of what sex work was like in Japan 300 years ago in an oddly affecting way.
Yeah, I mean, it's throughout the story, Kisuke can be a bit flirtatious and a little bit gross towards women, but there are people in this story who are actively making women's lives really terrible. I mean, this is not a massively heavy game on thinking about women's labor or something, but it is there, and there is and it's like attempts, if not outright accountability for people who mistreat sex workers in this. So
there's an acknowledgement of it, even though it's not a major part of the narrative.
For sure, yeah.
But speaking of the narrative, maybe we should actually talk about the story a little bit. I think we only really got into the first couple chapters in each story here, but the basic gist of it is that Kisuke is a ninja that worked under the service of Yuki Nojo. He was tasked with stealing a sword from the Narukami family, which is what Torihime and Momohime belong to. But things went badly, and he died, but managed to keep the sword, and killed some of his fellow ninjas along with it. But on his deathbed, or on the brink of death, a spirit, a master of the Oboro demon sword style, offered to fuse souls with him, and which would save Kisuke's life and also give the spirit an opportunity to pass his skills on to to a new person, because he had not done so to his satisfaction in life. And Kisuke agrees, so the soul fusion happens. Kisuke survives but has limited amnesia, does not remember killing a bunch of his comrades, reconnects with Yuki Nojo in the Iga ninja base, and is tasked with taking on Torihime. And when he meets Torihime, something stirs in his heart. He realizes that his previous mission, which was to steal the sword from Torihime's family, he had fallen in love with her, and part of why he died was that he was trying to protect her. But Torihime, unfortunately, had also died in the same struggle, but made a deal with the Buddha to live another 49 days on Earth so she could properly seal off the Inugami sword that was her family's guardianship, because again, a sword containing a powerful, dangerous dog demon. And together, for the second half of Kisuke's story, like, he and Torihime are sort of either working together or following each other to try and track down the missing sword and seal it off properly. And Kisuke, going from being kind of a amnesiac jerk, trying to figure out what happened to him in life, and eventually learning about the Oboro-style stuff and sort of rediscover or re-falling in love with Torihime, I thought was pretty cute. And the ending to the game, to his story, the first ending, he, furious that Torihime has to die, demands that Buddha revive her, and while Buddha sort of serenely tells him no, the Buddha allows Kisuke and Torihime to reincarnate into two new people who are given a second chance to meet each other again and fall in love again, which is all right, but a little sad. And the second ending, if you obtain the swords from his ending and Momohime's first ending, is Kisuke meeting Momohime, because the final boss for the second ending is against Momohime, possessed by Jinkuro. He manages to banish Jinkuro's soul, but Torihime does die, having run out of her 49 days. So Momohime and Kisuke sort of team up and as Muramasa buddy cops, I guess, to try and wander the countryside to try and find as many demon swords as they can to safely seal them away or collect them so they can't, spread their evil around Japan, which I thought was a nice ending. Like it's sort of gives you an idea, the feeling of this is a man and a woman working together, but they're in a platonic relationship because both of their hearts are elsewhere in a way that I thought was kind of sweet. We'll get into Momohime's story in a minute, but what were your feelings on Kisuke, Torihime, and his story?
I kind of like the ending and having the moment when he commits suicide, because he's like, well, if you're the Buddha and you're not going to revive Torihime, then I'm going to force someone's hand here, and he's kind of taking agency after being thrust into a situation not entirely of his own devices, or at least his own recollection. So it's cool to see that sort of agency being brought back, and the sort of and the romanticism that he has with Torihime in that ending. So I thought it was a nice ending. Not anything revolutionary, but gave me a little bit of warm fuzzies.
Yeah, I again, there were some warm, fuzzy feelings. I felt like that they never really betrayed Kisuke's character or made him do something that I thought was unbelievable or bad. I liked the resolution of the second ending because even though Torihime dies and Jinkuro gets his soul banished, it feels optimistic for both Momohime and Kisuke, and I just want those two kids to be happy.
Yeah, me too. They deserve happiness.
But let's talk about the other half of the Muramasa's story. In Momohime's path, again, we went into this a little bit. She was Yukinojo's fiancé, and when Jinkuro, who I think I incorrectly called a demon in the previous episode, Jinkuro is a samurai, and he was the pupil of Master Oboro that did the soul fusion with Kisuke, but he killed his master, and it probably isn't regarded as a true pupil anymore by Oboro. But Jinkuro meant to take possession of Yukinojo and use Yukinojo's position as a noble to for wealth, power, success, all that jazz. But it didn't work. Momohime stepped in front of the sword, and Jinkuro accidentally possesses Momohime instead. And that results in him trying to seek out Yukinojo, try to find another demon blade that will give him more power. That doesn't exactly work, and also Momohime is sort of resisting Jinkuro's dark ambitions, even though your fox companion Kongiku only wants whatever Jinkuro wants. And eventually Jinkuro gets the idea that if he turns into a fully powered demon with the demon sword skills, he'll be able to achieve his ends that way. So at one point you journey into hell to see if you can become a demon that way. That doesn't work. But then he gets the idea, maybe if I go into heaven and annoy some gods there, they can turn me into a demigod or a demon. And that doesn't really work either. That's when you fight Phrygian and Fujin. But then you get the idea to use another path to heaven, which is located in a monastery on in the southwest corner of the map, and that's where you have a final confrontation with Fudomyo, a god of wisdom from Japanese folklore, and also you fight the sort of guardian versions of again two of the main characters from Journey West, as in a sort of complicated boss fight where you have to sort of like jump around while fighting these two guardians and destroy weak points on a statue until it breaks. I didn't love that boss fight, and that storyline ends with Jinkuro sort of willingly going into hell to save Momohime's soul, him admitting that he won't be able to get what he wants this way, and he's he's done some bad things, so I guess I'll go to hell and let Momohime live, kind of situation. And Momohime, what exactly happens to her in ending one? She just sort of she goes back to Yukinojo. Yukinojo asks her to marry him, and she says, no, I'm going to be a nun for the rest of my life because I just want to be separate from all of this Demon Blade stuff and atone for everything I did while Jinkuro was possessing me, which is not a satisfying ending.
Well, I saw the ending was more so that, like, when she returns to Yukinojo, they are supposed to be married, but she says, I want to go on this pilgrimage of asceticism and become a monk because I want to find a way to save Jinkuro's soul.
Right. I was misremembering parts of it. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she is like, well, I throughout this journey, I've experienced so much. I've seen heaven, I've seen hell through the eyes of Jinkuro in my body. There's more to life than this, and if I can save the soul of someone who willingly sent himself to hell, that's kind of true enlightenment. And the corrupt monk Rankai follows her on this journey because he says, I want to atone as well, and I want to help you save this soul. And I actually really like that ending because it's Momohime rejecting this marriage to Yukinojo, who is kind of a twat.
Both Yukinojo and Rankai are complete jerks for when you encounter them in the story. And like at the very beginning of the game, you might think, oh, Yukinojo's people are just are good people, and Momohime was his fiance at one point. It's like no, they're trying to pull off a coup basically. With and steal the demon swords from Momohime's family to pull off some kind of nasty business, and they do demonstrate contrition a little bit at the end of Momohime's storylines, but that was, if not exactly a character turn, just a sort of a slightly unexpected revelation early in the game when you sort of see how awful those two characters are.
Yeah, and I liked that Momohime is, it shows kind of her growth as a character, and we don't always see that throughout the story. We don't always notice how she's growing and evolving and becoming kind of more set in these ideas of kind of expanding her understanding of the natural world around her and what exists and what doesn't. So I really like that ending.
And it also demonstrates her trying to have some self-efficacy, because for the large majority of the story, the player is aware that they are controlling Jinkuro possessing Momohime, and to a degree, Momohime is almost a passenger in her own body. But with Jinkuro gone and her having seen all of this and experienced all of this, like you described, her sort of wanting to go on her own journey, I guess is a powerful moment for her character development. But I still think this is maybe the least satisfying of the four endings I saw for this game. Momohime's second ending is similar to Kisuke's in that the final boss is Kisuke. As for Kisuke, it was Jinkuro possessing Momohime. But when you defeat Kisuke sort of with his dying breath does a final blow that is enough to kill Momohime, and sort of Kisuke dies, and Momohime is about to die, but then Jinkuro gets the idea that if his master was able to use soul fusion to save Kisuke, he could use the same technique to save Momohime. And it ends with Jinkuro performing that move, which leaves Omohime, which leaves Momohime alive, but with amnesia, just like what happened to Kisuke at the very beginning of the game. And she's adopted by a very sweet elderly couple, a little bit like Momotaro, and they name her Oboro because that is one of the names she was saying when they found her and she was asleep and just saying people's names. And a demon attacks the tiny village where her new parents live, and some sleeping memory within her allows her to perform some pretty amazing swordplay and kill the demon, which has Momohime, now named Oboro, realize that there's something inside her that she doesn't totally understand. She thanks the elderly couple for saving her and borrows a sword and some snacks from Grandma to go on a journey of self-discovery on her own. And then, like, as the credits roll, they basically describe and Momohime, now named Oboro, went to forge her own destiny and became a great adventurer of legend in a way that was a level of optimism and interest that I liked more than her first ending, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I like the idea that she may lose her memories of this adventure she embarked on with Jinkuro, but she still has that muscle memory in how to wield this blade from the time that Jinkuro was in her body. And so it's as if the skills that she learned throughout this, the knowledge she took in, and even the skills she learned in swordplay, were still all hers. And so it kind of once again removes more of that stubborn spot that this wasn't her story and that this was Jinkuro's, and further lets you know that no, this was Momohime's story all this time.
Yeah, and Jinkuro didn't have when he possessed Momohime for the first time. It's not like he had a battle-ready sword maiden to control. You have to start at level 1, like so many other RPG characters. And similar for Kisuke, who was not a master of the demon sword style when Oboro does the soul fusion for him. And I guess two characters we haven't mentioned maybe enough are the two Kitsune women. Yuzuruha is sort of a fox guardian for Kisuke's story, and Rangiku is a fox guardian that guides you in Momohime's story. And in these endings, usually in the form of foxes and not in the humanoid forms that we see them in for most of the game. Like in Kisuke's ending 1, there's a fox that's sort of trying to guide the newly reincarnated Kisuke and Torihime together. And in Momohime's second ending, there's a fox who's clearly implied to be Rangiku, just sort of looking at her sadly the whole time. That she's without her memories because Rangiku, or is it Kongiku or Rangiku? Kongiku. I'm getting names wrong in every podcast in 2021. I can't help it. It's real bad.
Is that the character from Rangiku? Is that the character from Bleach?
Oh yeah, there is a woman. There is a woman named Rangiku in Bleach. She's Hitsugaya's lieutenant. Mm-hmm. God, there are so many captains and lieutenants in Bleach. It's extremely easy to mix up names in that manga. Mm-hmm. But Tite Kubo is up to his old tricks. He's got a new manga out, and he did the character designs for the Sakura Wars game from last year. So he's living his best post Bleach life. But anyway, back to Kongiku. Kongiku was in love with Jinkuro. So with Jinkuro gone from the soul fusion technique, and a fox sadly looking on to Momohime is a little tragic. I felt for Kongiku in that moment.
Yeah, me too. It was kind of wistful seeing that, but I think in the second ending, Kongiku ends up joining Momohime, aka Oboro. Right. Right as she's leaving, I think. So it's all is not lost, and they can rekindle their friendship, this journeying partnership. Oh
yeah, they're going to be the next video game buddy comedy, right up there with Sam and Max or Ratchet and Clank. You'll love to see it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And after you unlock the fourth ending, whether it's Kisuke 2 or Momohime 2, the notification you get is, but there is still more to play. There is a sword called the Oboro Muramasa that can change fate, or which, again, I haven't researched this because I sort of don't want to have to resort to a YouTube video to see how it turns out. But I believe if you go the distance, unlock all 108 swords, and then fight new final bosses with Kisuke and Momohime with that new sword equipped, you will get endings that somehow allow Torihime to live, and somehow allow both Momohime and Jinkoto to live on each side. I'm guessing. Like the third ending seems like it's going to be a fate-changing, death-defying plot point in each of those, which is intriguing to me. That's something I kind of do want to see, but I didn't go the distance because I didn't want to level up both characters to 90.
Yeah. I looked at a couple of just little summaries for those third endings because I don't think I'm gonna do those at some point. And yeah, the second endings are fine. Some people might prefer the third endings because they seem to be more of a complete the circle sort of thing. But like with the game that we're going to talk about upcoming in Crimson Shroud, I like the less tidy endings more.
This is amazing timing because I know you weren't on those episodes, Eva, but we talked about tidy endings versus messy endings and optimistic endings versus somewhat less optimistic endings in the Radiant Historia episodes we recorded last month.
Oh.
And I even compared Radiant Historia to Dragon Quest XI, where one game has a much less tidy ending than the other, but I thought that both of those games were successful in how they executed their endings because of the tone of the game and sort of the plot machinations of each game. To echo what I said in that previous episode. Again, it would be part 2 of the Radiant Historia episodes. Sometimes I want the tidy ending, and sometimes I don't want the tidy ending. And right now, I just really like the second endings for both Momohime and Kisuke because they're not happy. There is loss and in both of them, but it's an outcome that I feel fits the tone of the story. And it didn't make me upset what happened. I'm happy that Momohime has discovers her own power and gets to forge her own story. And I'm happy that Kisuke remains true to Torihime and tries to go forward living the best version of his life to honor her in both of his endings. Sort of the reincarnation ending is a little different, but. I'm not sure I need a third ending that where everyone lives happily ever after, but I like this game enough that if I had more time and had and didn't have other projects looming, I think I would go for the third endings just to see how they were, because I am in some level interested in what they are.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. I don't think from what I've seen that they're bad endings. I just think that I've gotten the endings that I'm cool with, and now I just want to see what happens in the Genroku stories.
Yeah, they aren't bad endings necessarily. Again, this is me talking about them not knowing what they are, but they're just not something that you need.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, all right. If we've gone over the endings and we're talking about the episodic DLC, what else is there? And we definitely talked about how Raigen's got it going on. I'm not sure there's much else to talk about in Muramasa. It makes me want to play more games like it. Maybe go and try and revisit Odin Sphere, a game of which a playthrough I abandoned over a decade ago, and maybe also visit a Japanese hot spring.
Yeah, I think I'm in a pretty similar place. I had never completed a Vanillaware game before this. I'd been interested in Aegis Rim, as we had said before. I mean, it's only made me more interested, and yeah, maybe I'll go back and play some Odin Sphere as well. This experience certainly hasn't hurt the chances of those happening at all.
Odin Sphere is a little bit repetitive. I think the gameplay is maybe a little bit worse in Odin Sphere than Muramasa, but they do some very interesting things with RPG food that have stuck with me to this day, even though I don't think I made it to the halfway point in Odin Sphere. And 13 Sentinels is just good as hell. I've talked about it on a couple other podcasts for RPG Fan, but that was one of my 4 favorite games of 2020, and I recommend it to anyone that has enough patience to play a 30-hour visual novel with some interspersed real-time strategy battles. And Eva, knowing a little bit about you and your tastes from having podcasted with you for over a year now, I think you would enjoy 13 Sentinels. I think you could. I think you would have a good time with that one.
Hey, I trust you. We'll do it.
Yeah, I think we're about ready to cap off the March 2021 of Retro Encounter. Thank you so much, Eva, for talking to me about Muramasa the Demon Blade / Muramasa Rebirth over these 2 episodes. I'm glad I finally crossed it off. I had a lot of fun with it. I think it is a worthy recommendation to anyone that manages to download it to your Vita before the PlayStation Store disappears forever on that system. And I'm looking forward to what we have next in Retro Encounter. But speaking of which, maybe we should talk about the future of Retro Encounter a little bit. We have most of April and May planned out already. Next week we're doing an episode about this is maybe a little bit close to you, Eva. It's about social media. We have a lot of social media responses that we receive at RPG Fan via Facebook and Twitter and other places, and we want to address a specific concern that we see a lot on RPG Fan's social media. So I brought we're going to have you and some other social media staff on an episode next week to talk about a specific question, a specific concept that we hear from our audience a lot. So it's sort of a special audience response episode coming next week. But after that, you mentioned Crimson Shroud not 5 minutes ago. We're finally going to record an episode on Crimson Shroud, that real weird DSiWare game from Matsuno that is basically a D&D campaign right down to the dice rolls and the figurines on a map. That is such a weird, interesting thing that I am excited to talk about it with you in a few weeks. But after Crimson Shroud and our social media episode, we're doing 2 episodes on Suikoden 3, a PS2 classic RPG that I recently learned is downloadable on PS3, but not PS4. And I couldn't get my old PS2 disc working, but I had no problem at all throwing 10 bones at the PS3 to download that game. Suikoden 3 is the 3rd Suikoden game we are playing in 3 years. So I think, oh man, does that mean I have to play Suikoden 4 next year? I hope not. I haven't heard great things about that one, but I have heard good things about Suikoden 3, so I'm excited to play that in April very soon. But coming in May, I won't say exactly how it all shapes up, but we are doing 4 episodes on Dragon Quest. Not Dragon Quest 1, on Dragon Quest in general, so please look forward to us celebrating the Dragon Quest 35th anniversary in May. But if you want to celebrate Dragon Quest or other video games with us, the best way to reach out to us is to email retro@rpgfan.com. I check that every week, and we don't get a lot of emails, but I respond to every single one that I get. You can also comment on RPG Fan's message boards, or our Facebook page, our Instagram page, our Twitter page, our Discord server, our YouTube channel, or our Twitch channel, something streaming every day on Twitch. Please interact with RPG Fan however you choose to. There are also 3 other fine podcasts on RPG Fan: Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness, Rhythm Encounter every 2 weeks about RPG music, and Phoenix Edge, which is a weekly podcast mostly focused on current events, but they talk about all kinds of stuff over on Phoenix Edge. So please give Hat, Eric, and those guys a listen as well. After listening to all of RPG Fans podcasts, please review us on iTunes or Google Play, or however you plan, or however you listen, however you interact. We love all the feedback we can stand. Please give us feedback. But if you want to give feedback to me directly, or Eva directly, you should reach out to our individual social media accounts. Eva, how can listeners find you?
So y'all can find me on RPG Fan's general social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram as @EVA_LEES.
So you finally realized that people might not immediately figure out how to spell Eva Lise.
Yeah, maybe.
Totally fair. But listeners, if you want to find me on social media, I have 2 Twitter accounts. The first one I use most of the time is @TheRealMonsoon, and the second of which I use other times is @EvokerForDogs. I am also Monsoon Mike on RPG Fans Discord server. You know what this game made me do, Eva? Maybe this is surprising, maybe it isn't. I was on a regular grocery store run when I was past the halfway point in this game, and I saw a bunch of mochi ice cream in the frozen foods aisle, And, eating, like, pearl mochi and strawberry mochi in this game made me think, mochi ice cream sounds pretty good. And I bought a perhaps irresponsible amount of mochi ice cream, like, less than a week ago.
I support this. I am in the same boat.
I have not finished that mochi ice cream yet, but so far, no regrets. Listeners, thank you. Good night, and good luck.